TESOL Pop, Season 10, Episode 2. How can we equip our students with skills that help them build stronger relationships in the workplace? This is the big question that my guest today, Leo Wu, addresses. Now, Leo teaches General English and Business English in Taiwan, and he focuses on going beyond grammar and vocabulary to build students' soft skills to set them up for success in their careers. Let's join the conversation where I asked Leo, what does business English involve?
Well, first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with thinking that business English or most of the English, like business English lessons or programs, involve tons of English words, higher level phrases, sentence structures, grammar, and so on and so forth. I can say that that is one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have, especially in Asian countries. Here in Taiwan, we do have this kind of like misconceptions everywhere. And yet, it is more important that we think about like what is the purpose, what is the meaning, what is the goal of like what do students really need. Most of my trainees students in Asia have something in common. They know tons of vocabulary, they remember memorize lots of grammar patterns, rules, phrases, but the truth is they still fail to utilize all of these English words, sentence structures they've learned and remember in their real life situations, so that they also fail to speak fluent English or communicate well in the business world. And we always talked about like the ultimate goal in the business world is to enhance the communication, like the overall communication, right? So we always want to make sure that we can speak fluently, we can communicate efficiently and effectively, but they still fail to speak fluent English or to communicate well in a business world. So this is actually quite common among Asian learners that we used to see English as a subject and approach this language in the wrong way or even taught in the wrong way. When we're young and small in school, like it's always about getting higher grades or memorizing as many words as we could. Even you know a lot of words, but you cannot use them in real world. You're still not using it as a communication tool. And like I said previously, we all know for sure that communication is the key in business environments. Therefore, my philosophy is and will always be building confidence and making sure you know the fundamentals in the first place. These could be everyday, most commonly used sentence structures, but the point is to really familiarize yourself with them, digest, internalize, making them truly yours. After that, you will be able to combine your language skills with the business knowledge, your expertise you already have, and do the output so that you can produce effective communication. To really see and use English as a communication tool to get the result you want in different situations. I want to give you an example. In my business program, I always put my students in situations where they need to really communicate with each other to solve a problem. I'll make sure the scenarios are real and practical enough so that my trainees or my students can really feel the need or urgency to put effort into understanding the issues and using what they have learned to achieve results. For instance, we conduct mock business meetings to develop marketing campaign solutions for brands like Starbucks, Uber Eats, even Vespa. Furthermore, we do role playing to assign different tests to trainees, giving them the chance to assume different roles and set appropriate tone for holding themselves accountable.
You know, when you're describing a lot of students for your context in Taiwan, they tend to feel that English is like a subject such as biology, like there's right or wrong answers. Do you feel that kind of stems from the exam system? Because I know there's quite a big pressure on students in high school to pass exams in English and other subjects, of
Exactly.
course, that affects their university options. Do you feel
Yeah.
that's what is maybe misshaping, misaligning studies of English? Students are studying to pass a test rather than to use a language to communicate.
Yeah, so for me, it's more about like you gotta have two different approaches in this. Like, you want people to pass exams or like to pass the university entrance exam. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But if you gotta use the language as a communication tool, you gotta be able to really be in the real life situations to do like practical applications more often. So like we gotta have multiple approaches towards this kind of issue, not just like, hey, you gotta see this as a subject, you gotta get higher grades, or you gotta do this so that you can pass the entrance exam. Not like that. So that could be one of the wrong way that have we have taken for such a long period of time in Taiwan in our education system.
I think that is not just in Taiwan, but in a lot of educational systems where we see this negative washback from an exam that's meant to
Exactly.
be supporting learning and supporting both the linguistic foundations and the communication skills. But what we find is that we get really good students who are great at test taking, but not necessarily good at language use. So I think this
Totally
is
agree. Yes.
indicative of
Yeah.
many exam systems around the world, not just Taiwan's. I'm really excited actually then today to step away from that kind of world of grammar and vocabulary and that sort of piece of business English that does exist, to focus more on the relationship side. Because I know you work with your students that you're teaching now to kind of think about how they build their communication skills, how they build their soft skills so they can use their language
Sounds
and flourish in the workplace as multilingual speakers. Could you give an example of how you've helped your students build relationships using English? Because that is a key part of business English, isn't it? Is building good relationships with your colleagues, building good relationships with your clients, your boss. How do you do it in your lessons?
well, for that question, there are actually many different approaches that we can choose to take to help students or colleagues in one company build stronger or closer relationships. I recall an experience from last year. I was invited to give a business seminar at the MDS Group Taipei office located in Neihu, Taipei. Neihu is a humid city. Yeah, so in order to get a better understanding of the company's background and to get all the people engaged, involved in our seminar, I always push myself to do some proper research prior to the event. And speaking of that, my mission that time was there to teach business email writing. And we're thinking about why don't we write a thank you letter to really send appreciation to our beloved colleagues, to really show gratitude after we've completed all the do's and don'ts and learned the right ways to write an email. So at the end of the seminar, I really asked them to write a thank you letter or email to a colleague to show their love or care for their support. And at the same time, they can practice writing with the techniques, phrases, structures they just learned, but also doing something meaningful. So you know, uh, for me, that was actually quite a fantastic moment that I recalled, and I felt like they really got an opportunity to bond closer with their colleagues, and that's what we aim for, right? To foster long-term relationships among our coworkers in the workplace, because it certainly enhances the overall team's morale, performance, positive attitude, and satisfaction.
I
Yeah.
think this is really inspiring that you're kind of using these kind of smaller interactions that happen in the workplace that are often overlooked and bringing those into your business English teaching, because I think they're not really explored that much and yet they're so powerful, as we've mentioned. I wonder, are there any other ways or ideas you'd like to share that focus on this relationship building that listeners could try out with their students?
I'm thinking about doing one of the most fundamental, classic, but essential activities, icebreaker activities. So we could possibly use icebreaker activities right at the beginning of each class or each session to help students get to know each other better, creating a more comfortable and open atmosphere for learning. And I think if you're able to create a good vibe in your classroom, it's going to be beneficial for both parties because we feel good. So we want to make contribution and want to make more contribution. So for example, I did story marathon relay challenge by simply ask the students to connect the story dices displayed on the screen and contribute to make a story that is convincing. So we have to, come up with something that makes sense. So this activity relies so much on teamwork and it's all about team effort. Um, So it's good for your listening because you have to focus, like you have to make sure that you focus like entirely on the person who is speaking to make sure that you know exactly what she is or what he is trying to say. And then when it's your turn to speak, you got to make sure that you come up with something convincing or something persuasive and something educational at the same time. So I think it was fun, and most of my trainees enjoyed it. And in addition, like I mentioned previously, that we have done a lot of group projects into our business program. When they're involved in a group project, they brainstorm ideas, thoughts, possible solutions together. And this is really, really similar to the real life, like real business situations. Like you got to work together towards a common goal or towards multiple goals. And this can foster teamwork and can certainly improve relationships among individuals. And obviously, there's one thing I want to mention: the idea of the kudos on LinkedIn. I've done this when I was studying in the UK. This is a fantastic way to acknowledge and appreciate your colleagues or connections for their skills. So it's like writing an email to send appreciation, send your gratitude to your beloved colleagues. This is kind of like the same idea. You acknowledge your colleagues for their skills, expertise, achievements, contributions. And for me, it's quite essential that we leave the message that is authentic, something that is real and meaningful, because all relationships are mutual. So make sure you personalize your comment and maintain a high level of authenticity.
Leo, it's been lovely talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights into your classes and how you build relationships and develop these soft skills. Before we close today, please can you tell listeners where can they find out more and follow your work?
Well, Laura, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm just more than thrilled to have this opportunity to share my experiences and teaching journey in the teaching fields. If you want to know more about me and get useful business English content, search Uber English. So that will be WBERENG on Instagram, and I believe that you will find something practical and useful out there.
Brilliant. And as always, I'm going to include the links in the show notes so you can find those easily, so you can follow Leo's work and see the wonderful work he's doing in his classes.
If you've got a question or an idea that you'd like to pitch to the podcast, then you can go to the website tsopop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do here at tsopop by sharing the episode with your teaching community, by leaving a rating review wherever you listen to the podcast, or by even buying us a coffee by going to ko-fi.com/tsopop.